Rich, welcome to the Living Off Rentals podcast.
Well, it's my pleasure to be with you, Kirby.
Yeah, I
I
appreciate
hope I
you.
can enlighten somebody on real estate. I don't know if it'll work, but
I'm very confident it'll work. I appreciate you taking the time. I'll just give a little intro here on how we know each other and what I know about your background, and then I'll let you fill in the rest of it. But I've been super excited about doing this interview for a while now because I met you through your daughter, actually, Ashley, who went to school with my younger brother, Heath. And they're a couple years behind me, but I knew her growing up. And then she came back from LA after spending some time out there and was involved in real estate and started working with us in our real estate investment company about, man, I think it's like 6 or 7 years ago now.
yeah.
And then thereafter married one of our partners in the company and has been an active part of that. And so through her, I met you, and you're kind of one of my real estate investing heroes because you're living the dream that I think a lot of people in this community have of working hard and building a portfolio while you're doing that one day you can live off of that will support you, and I think you're an example of that. And I want to dive in more to the details of how you've done that over the years and some of the advice that you might have for some of the younger investors in this community. So let's first start off. Can you share a little bit about your background and then how you got into real estate?
Well, it was interesting. My father had a gas station in a garage. We had to work back then. Didn't have a choice. And there was a lady that came into the gas station every Saturday. And back then we had to check the tires, oil, everything.
What year was this?
In 75, 74.
Okay.
And anyway, every Saturday, she would give me 50-cent tip and she would make a statement. Now you got to picture a 12 or a 13-year-old. Okay.
All right.
She would say, buy all the black dirt you can. They don't make it anymore. Well, Can you imagine? I'm thinking this lady's nuts. What do you mean? So this went on for the whole summer, and I went in there the one time and told my dad, I said, Dad, this lady's nuts. I said, every week, the same thing.
Yeah.
And he said to me, he goes, you might want to listen to that lady. She owns all of Manhattan. So
Manhattan, Illinois, not New York.
Manhattan,
right?
Illinois.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was that. And I didn't really comprehend it too much at that age. So I was in high school and I was getting ready to graduate. And my dad, he said to me, what are you going to do after high school? Well, back then it wasn't like today. I mean, he didn't say, do you want to go to college? What do you want to do?
Yeah.
I said, well, I'll figure it out, Dad. I'll figure it out. I'm not there yet. So anyway, I was on a tow. He says to me, well, let me just tell you this. If you're planning on staying at home when you graduate from high school, you're going to pay $200 a month rent. I just looked at him like a deer in headlights. I said, well, I guess I got to live somewhere.
Yeah.
So anyway, with that following week, we had a wrecker. So I had to go on a towing job. I had a car on the back of the truck, and there was this little house for sale. I went by and I'm looking at it. Well, I called the number. Back then it was Bell Realty. And the guy said, yeah, I'll show it to you. So we met the next day over there. And he looks at me and says, man, how old are you? I said, well, I'm not 18 yet. He says, what do you want to buy a house for? I said, I don't know. Can I buy the house? And I told him I had $3,500 saved up. So he said, I'll tell you what, the house is $11,500. So the next day he came and took me to the bank. And when I'm telling you this stuff, you just don't see this today anymore.
Yeah. At
And I'm
17, you saved like 40% of the cost of the house. That's pretty
exactly.
impressive. Yeah.
So I'm sitting at the bank, and the banker, he says, "Hey, fill these papers out." So I filled them out. Well, my dad had 9 brothers and 4 sisters. So I had my name there. I said, he says, "Rich Garland." He said, "Are you related to," and he named all the brothers and sisters. And I said, "Well, the first one was my dad." And he said, "Well, you know what? I'm going to give you a loan." I said, "Really?" He said, "If you work half as hard as all those guys, you'll be fine." So anyway, he gave me the loan, and my house payment was $101 a month.
Wow.
So I went back and I told my dad, I said, "Dad, I'm moving out." He says, "Why?" I said, "Well, you were going to charge me $200 a month rent. I bought a house and it's 101." So that's how it started.
That's incredible. So that was a 30-year loan that you got at the
No, it
time.
was 10 years,
10 years, and it was still $101.
$101, and I paid it off in 3 years.
Oh my gosh.
Yes,
Wow.
yes.
So you bought that one at 17, paid it off in
Yeah.
3 years. Your first paid off property. That's impressive. Yeah, you don't hear too many people buying number one at 17, but then also paying it off that quickly. So then what'd you do after that?
Well, I got out of high school, and I always worked for my dad. And anyway, I got on with a garbage company. So I was a garbage man for like 35 years. Well, the company I ended up with is who everybody knows today is Waste Management.
Oh, okay.
But I never liked it. It was a good job,
Hmm.
but I never liked working for anybody. I loved being an entrepreneur. So anyway, uh, I just kept saving, and I met another lady who she taught me a lot. Her name was Bonnie Desura. She owned Desura Realty,
Okay.
and every time I'd see her, I'd just talk to her, pound questions, and she was kind of hesitant, always answering me, and I said, "I would just love to follow you." And she goes, "Why?" I said, "I don't want anything from you but knowledge." I said, "With that, I can conquer the world. I don't want a dollar from you. I don't want anything from you but knowledge, because knowledge is power."
Hmm.
So that's how that started. And then I bought quite a few houses with her, you
Okay.
know, on, I mean, through her real
Yeah.
estate company.
Yeah.
And the thing is with the real estate, it wasn't work to me.
Hmm.
It was my passion. And I never considered it work, even with what I've got today. And if I could advise anybody that's out there, if they're going to get into this, and if they're married, if your wife isn't on board with this, don't do it, because it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
And that's my suggestion to anybody. If your wife or significant other isn't on board,
Yeah.
it's not going to work.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. I think that's great advice. I definitely agree with that. Maybe help them get on board if you're really passionate about it and they're not.
Right.
Yeah. So let's walk through this then. So you met Bonnie and you started buying some properties and you were just using money. So you would work as a garbage man. You'd save money
Yep.
on the side and then you'd purchase properties with the cash, or were you getting loans at the time?
I only I ended up getting loans for a couple, and I had bad experiences with the banks.
Yeah.
Um, anyway, I I just said to myself, after I had like 4 of them, I said, from now on, I will finance myself. So I got another full-time job, and I just kept it rolling like that and kept buying.
Wow. So you're
So
using the
I
money
just,
from your second job to purchase properties then?
right,
Wow.
right.
Okay. So this
Yes.
was then. So you started in the late 70s then,
Yep.
and you just pretty much continuously through your whole career were buying. What was the pace that you were buying at?
I was trying to do one every 2 years because I wanted to always have them paid off.
Okay.
Um, that was just my goal. Uh, I mean, if you talk to a lot of people today, I did not do it the right way. They want you to always be leveraged out. The big word that I don't like when I always hear cash flow, but most people, the cash flow, if they had a catastrophic thing happen with their properties, they're going to be digging into the pot.
Mm-hmm.
And I never wanted to dig into the pot.
Yeah.
So I always wanted it paid for. The other big thing that you hear is, I still get my capital gains when my buildings always appreciate.
Mm-hmm.
So I just never cared what anybody else had. I just had my little path that I wanted to be
Mm-hmm.
following. And I think it seemed to work out
Yeah.
because if I could suggest to anybody that's going to get into this also, if you are married, I suggest to always have your primary house paid off and then go play.
Yeah.
Always have a roof over your family's head.
Yeah.
And that's what I followed.
Yeah. I think it's great advice. And I think it flies, like you said, it flies in the face of some conventional advice because a lot of people give advice based on spreadsheets and it's not based on actually doing the work and going out there and purchasing properties. And so on a spreadsheet, if you leverage, you can always get a higher return with more leverage, but
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't take into account the risk factor, like you said. And you can only spread yourself so thin too. So it's obviously your strategy has obviously worked out well for you. So from that time then when you started buying to retire, when did you retire?
6 years ago, 55.
Okay, you were 55.
55.
And what did you accumulate during that time? How many properties?
What was that?
How many
We got
properties during that time?
we're holding a couple dozen places.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
and they're all paid off. And so, uh, what does the typical deal look like that you were doing during that time period?
Well, my plan was I wanted to own my whole neighborhood.
Okay.
That was my plan, and we're not too far from that now.
Yeah.
And everybody knows that I buy, and when their folks or anybody passes away in the old neighborhood, they come to me first. Yeah,
Nice.
and
Good way to pick your neighbors.
yep. So yes, it's very interesting because they don't want to deal with anybody but me, and
Yeah.
it works out nice.
Yeah.
But they all know how hard I worked, so that helps too.
Yeah, and they say
Yeah.
you should niche down. So if you're owning a whole neighborhood, then you don't have to travel far to manage it, and the area, the inspectors, all that, right?
Well, I listen to a lot of podcasts and everything, and I just used the guy that I listened to a little bit is Grant Cardone.
Yeah.
He would hate what I do, but he likes everything under one door, roof,
Right.
which that's fine. But I just never liked picking, I have a lot of duplexes,
Hmm.
and when someone moves out, you got to mix personalities. And I never cared for that because you hope that they like the neighbor and all that.
Oh yeah.
So I got my duplexes, but I have mostly single family homes.
Okay.
And it's worked out great because all my properties are within a half a mile from each other if you
Wow.
drew a circle. So it's all together.
And you
And
manage them yourself?
I manage them and the whole shot. I I'm not going to talk bad about people, but before I retired, the people I worked for asked me to do sales. And I did that with the garbage company.
Uh-huh.
And I'm not into dishonest people.
Hmm.
And I met too many management companies that are not in it for the landlord, they're in it for themselves.
Yeah.
And I just got so brokenhearted when I would go to try to sell them our services, and they'd say, "Hey, you cut this, we'll give you our business if you give us what you're going to save us."
Mm.
And I said, "Well, what about the landlord? And we are the landlord." And I
Yeah.
just didn't like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So what did that involve? I think a lot of people are afraid. I mean, you've got, 25 properties or so, and what does it involve to, doesn't that optimize all your time or monopolize all your
No,
time?
no, it does not. In the summer, yes, I'm pretty busy. Um, I like giving a good product out there.
Hmm.
I guess I'm going to say I try to correlate myself with a McDonald's, a Burger King, and that everybody thinks that they're in business to sell hamburgers. Look where their property's at, prime property.
Yeah.
And I fix my stuff up really nice, and I shouldn't have a problem for 10 or 15 years.
Wow.
So all I have to do is maintain. And I have great tenants. I really do.
Yeah. And how do you select the tenants? Is it based on a certain criteria?
I, you might think it's weird, but if you pull up and you want to rent from me and you have a really nice car, first thing I ask is if you have a car payment before anything.
Yeah.
And if you do, I just usually shun you away because if something happens, hard times, the car payment's going to come before my rent.
Hmm.
And I don't want that.
Interesting. Yeah.
So that's one of the first things I look at.
Yeah. You probably learn different things to watch for over the years, to select a better tenant base than typical.
Yes, yes. It's been fun though. Like I said, if you could usually read people,
Hmm.
you know, and if they're going to lie to you right off the get go, you're not going to get your rent.
Yeah.
And I keep my rents reasonable. That's another thing. I got a lot of buddies that have a lot of properties,
Hmm.
and they're a lot higher than I am, and they holler at me a lot. But my goal is to keep you.
Yeah.
I know what my numbers need to be. I'm not in this to be greedy. I know what I need to make. Never cared what anybody else had.
Yeah.
So I think that's the secret too.
That's
You
great. Stay
know.
focused on your own.
Yep.
Yeah. So, can you share a little bit about what you target? Like, what is the numbers on a typical deal look like for you? Like, what's an ideal deal?
Well, I don't, if I can't average 20, 25%, I don't even do it.
Okay.
That's what I look at. I want to get my return back quick.
So 25%. So your annual rent needs to be 25% of your all-in purchase and rehab. Is
Yep.
that okay?
Yep.
Wow, that's good. So can you walk me through like one of your deals then? What is that? So you're buying it for
Well,
100,000
just,
or
just figure this one out. Okay. So I just purchased two properties. Uh, anyway, I ended up getting two houses for $100,000. One is a 4 bedrooms, two full baths, and a full basement. I want to guess $1,500 into that property, and I got it rented out for $1,450 a month.
1450?
The house that's next, the house that's next door, it needed a lot of love. So anyway, my wife and I, we went through it. We had the vision of what we wanted this to look like. So anyway, we totally gutted this house. We put 35,000 into it. Now, when you say these numbers, you got to figure, I'm not counting my labor and everything.
Okay.
That's just material.
And you're doing all the work
So
yourself, pretty much.
I'm doing all the work myself. We gutted this house from the studs. We put new windows, electrical, plumbing, new siding, everything. Well, anyway, we've got that one rented for $1,350 a month. So on that 135,000, it's almost bringing in $3,000.
Wow.
So there you go.
That's incredible. Yeah. And that's, where is that located?
And well, now I have 6 houses on that same street.
Is that in Joliet?
In Joliet.
Okay, in Joliet.
Yep.
Yeah. So it's sort of a working class area.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah. And that's, man, that is an incredible ROI. And, you know, like you said, you got to put the sweat equity into it. You've got that into it, but you know, you can't touch numbers like that typically. So that's great.
Yeah.
So when, I guess I'm curious, because a lot of people I think have a similar strategy where they're working their W-2 and they're buying rental properties with the intent that one day they're going to live off the income from the rentals. At what point did you feel like you were secure? Like if you had lost your job, you felt like, okay, I've got enough now to where I think I'd be okay.
Oh, that was probably when I had 4 or 5 places. What I looked at is what I brought home every week from the regular job. If I could generate that much from 4 places, what I get, you know, each house per week, why do I want to work for somebody else?
Yeah.
So anyway, that was my plan. But since they were doing so well, I just kept working because I enjoyed my job. Like I said, my buildings were my passion. They were like my little babies.
Yeah.
And, you know, I could have retired probably when I was 30, but, you know, I just like nice things.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
so the properties worked out very well.
Yeah.
You know, but that's what I always looked at. What am I bringing home from my paycheck every payday? If I can generate that from my buildings, I don't want to go to work.
Right.
You know, because my goal was from this other lady too, is she always kept saying, you want to make money when you're sleeping. And that was the goal.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I think a lot of people kind of find themselves in that same situation where they have a goal to where they feel comfortable, but they'll still continue to work after that. Because what are you going to go to a beach and just like hang out, you know? So
Right.
if you can still accumulate some more and get a little more security and comfort there, it just allows you to have a little more in the future, I guess. So I think that's interesting, though. You had the ability to walk away from your job very early on. It provided that, but you just decided to stay until retirement, really.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're kind of deep in the heart, or deep in the throes, I guess, of this COVID panic and craziness that's going on. What is your feeling around your real estate at this point? Like, do you feel like you're going to change up your model at all? You've been through obviously a lot of ups and downs over the years. How do you think about it?
Well, with that said, I would hope with this situation going on that everybody would sit back and really dial in their life and say some prayers to people that aren't fortunate, because this is really, really going to hurt a lot of people. And in the real estate game, if you're prepared and you got some money set aside, the people that are all leveraged out, they're going to be hurting. And I'm not in that position. I'm blessed. I always listened to what my dad always used to tell me. He said, his opinion or his voice to me was save your money like you're working for yourself at all times. He said, because nobody cares about you. And that's so true with these companies, what they're doing to the young employees today.
Yeah.
And I don't think that they realize what's going to happen. In today's market, everybody's going, the conventional pensions are gone away, Kirby.
Yeah.
And if they're going to rely on a 401k, they're never, ever going to retire. Never.
Yeah.
So they better wake up. But the people that are leveraged out with properties, if they can ride through this, that's great. But a person, let's say like you or me, if you're ready to jump, you're going to buy them 50 cents on the dollar. It's
Yeah.
coming.
Yeah.
'08 ain't even had nothing on this one.
Really? You feel like
I know.
the real estate market's really going to feel it?
Yep, I really do.
Yeah.
Yep. And
Yeah.
now, if you're talking on my tenant side, I am wholeheartedly telling you that I have great tenants, and if something happens that they can't take care of me, I'll take care of them. We'll ride it out together because I'm fortunate enough when you don't have no mortgages, you can absorb a little bit.
How would
So
you recommend setting that up? Because I think other people will be in that same situation, so that you help them, but also at the same time don't get taken advantage of. Because I think it can become a slippery slope once they realize, I it's not mandatory for me to pay rent, maybe, or there's flexibility here. So how do you set something like that up?
well, again, I can't stress enough how I have really good tenants. They're hardworking people. We'll talk about it if that time comes. Nobody's ever approached me as of yet, but I would work with them on, you tell me what we can do, and let them tell me, and then we'll go from there. Because I have people that I think their word is their word.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still old school, and when I
Yeah.
pick tenants, that's kind of what I look for.
Yeah.
So
That's great. That's great. And I think that's that. Hopefully, there's more people who are willing to do that. There's one approach that I heard recently where a guy recommended, give a month or two of free rent, maybe, but you could also work it into a longer term payment plan. So if they've got a year left of a lease, or they sign a new lease saying, okay, the first month's free, but we'll work in at least partial payback over a period of time, so that you're not out that money if you need it, but yet you're giving them some ability not to be evicted right away, for not
right,
paying when they've lost a job or some other issue. So I think it's smart to keep great tenants, and like you said, if they're liars or they're not good tenants to start with, then you're probably not going to be incentivized to want to keep them around anyway. But you've chosen some good ones. So I'm curious. You've done this since the late '70s. What is one of the worst deals you've done, and what's one of the best deals you've done, and what attributed to
well, I haven't had a worse deal.
that?
I haven't. The one of the best deals I've had is the one I just explained to you about with the two houses.
Wow. Okay.
I actually brought some younger guys that wanted to get into this game over to look at them, and they shunned away from them because of the little house, and they didn't have the vision.
Yeah.
And they just needs too much work. I said, but look at what you could have, and they
Yeah.
didn't. So that's how I ended up with those. So that was a good deal. I mean, you tell me where you can almost make $3,000 on 135,000.
Yeah. And what's it probably appraised for at this point? The two houses together.
Right now, they're probably 250 easily, easily. Yeah.
Jeez,
And we
that's
bought them last October.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So what attributed to that great deal is just having the vision, being able to see what others can't see.
Well, I don't think a lot of people have the vision, and they don't, I think people want to move too fast. They need to slow down,
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, if you talk to a lot of people on how I did it, they'd say I'm nuts. If you got $3-4 million sitting there in equity, they're going, yeah, but look at what you could have.
Yeah.
And again, I can't stress it enough. Maybe I'm stupid. I don't know, but I don't care what anybody else has.
That's right.
And I think we get caught up into that rat race and just keep rolling. And when's enough enough? I
That's a
just
great
wanted to
question.
always, be comfortable. I never cared what the next person had. So I think we get caught up into that,
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely.
And yeah.
And it's obviously paid off for you over the years. I mean, accumulating that much. I mean, if you've got 25 properties, that's a lot of equity when they're all paid off, and a lot of security. And then obviously you're not paying mortgages, so it's a ton of monthly cash flow that's coming in as well. And so it's tough to argue with that position. Like maybe you could get there a little bit faster by leveraging, maybe. But obviously, this scenario has worked for you. So it's tough to argue when you've accomplished what you've accomplished. So I think it's great. What's one piece of advice that you wish you had before you started doing this?
One piece of advice before I started doing it, uh, I had nobody to guide me. When I jumped into this, my family was not involved in any of this. They didn't want to be involved in it. When I started it, I had this goal. I asked many people that used to come into the gas station that I knew had money. And I said, would you like to invest with me? Here's my plan. And I got no. Well, you got to realize back then, the banks were paying 15, 16% on CDs. So then in '08, the market crashed. Well, by then I had like 10 properties, and all these people that were getting 2% on their CDs came to me and said, hey, can we invest with you? And I said, hell no. I says, I needed you when I was broke, not now. So
Yeah.
I wasn't going to let them get on the gravy train now.
Yeah.
So yeah, I could have had a lot of investors back then, but they got to get on when I was broke.
Yeah.
So that's how I started it.
Wow. Well, it takes a lot of courage to jump in without a mentor like that and just have the vision and execute on it. And it was a long term plan, and it sounds like it's paid off. So I really appreciate hearing your story, and I think it's very inspiring for people to know that it's possible, that you don't have to build. My last guest I interviewed, Eric Upchurch. He's a younger guy who purchased 570 doors last year, and he's super
I
aggressive.
heard him.
Yeah, and there's a lot to be said for his strategy, and there's a lot to be said for your strategy. And I think there's pros and cons to each, and I think there's totally different risk factors to each as well. And so I think I always have admired the old school way of investing. And I've always thought my goal personally was to build a portfolio of 24 properties that each paid 500 a month. And I thought, man, that's great, because if it's free and clear 500 after all your expenses and set asides, that's enough to live on for pretty much anyone. And so goals shift and change over the years, but you've stayed at it, and you're such a testament to what real estate can do for somebody. So I appreciate you sharing your story today.
No problem. I just it will work if you stick with it. And my whole premise behind it all was I wanted to spend as much time as I could with my family, and it gives me that opportunity now. Because in the end, that's all we've got is our family.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Well, you've done a great job with yours. I know your daughter well, and she's great, and I love your family. So, thanks again for taking the time today, and I appreciate it.
Thank you very much, sir.